I'm not sure if you know this, but your anxiety needs an adventure. Humans have been taking voyages and grand expeditions for eons, yet today we remain stagnant. Anxiety flourishes because of our idle nature. Take back your health. Seek your next adventure. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. My name's Devin. Thanks so much for joining me. If you're new here, just a little bit about me. I'm a therapist, but a therapist who's really fallen in love with the world of ideas, not just in therapy and in psychology, but throughout the span of human knowledge. And so, as I continue to grow and to build this channel and investigate kind of what there is, that range is going to expand too. And so, make sure you subscribe to follow along with all the different topics that we're going to cover here and all the things that I have coming up. I know that things have been a little scarce lately. Times have been busy and laptops haven't worked. Today, for those of you following along my debacle with the laptop, it's actually working today, so it's great. But I think that what we have coming down the pipe, maybe 2024 most likely, is kind of that time that's, I think, gonna really flourish for this channel. And so make sure you subscribe to follow along. You can also follow along to my newsletter, Reaching More, and that's gonna be once a week, and that's really all I've been writing lately, but I hope to start writing more articles and you'll get those there as well. But that weekly newsletter is kind of that weekly reminder, and I cover something new that I learned, a new topic. I also try to talk about the books that I've been reading. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens quite frequently. And then I also just share a resource that's been helpful for me in many different ways. It might be a podcast, it might be an app, or a website, whatever that is. It's been helpful for me, and I hope that it's helpful for you too. So you can find that link down below and subscribe there too. And you also get my reading list of the great books of the Western world just for free. I spend a lot of time kind of trying to work through them and combine them and find the right translations and accessible copies of these books. All of that information's in there as well, and you get that for free. So don't be a stranger. But what I have for us in store, yes, is about anxiety, about that big heavy elephant that sits on many of our chests every day, this thing that gets in our way of so many different tasks, of even baseline communication. It gets in our way. And I think that our society has a misunderstanding after reading a lot into anxiety and kind of the point where I'm exhausted of it, but getting to understand how our anxiety is affected by what we do and what we believe, and, well, what we don't do. And so, as I said already, adventure is kind of that key. And so what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to start this conversation on how we can improve our anxiety, not to get rid of it, because anxiety is good. A good healthy dose of anxiety keeps us from dying many different times. It gets our nerves going, ready for action. But when we are stagnant and we have anxiety, it's doing us no good. And so it's good to stretch ourselves. It's good to expand, as we're going to talk about. But I think it's important that we kind of prepare our minds to kind of enter into this new understanding of how to look at anxiety and how to examine within ourselves and be mindful of how we've approached anxiety in the past and how we can continue to change and grow. I think that's so important. And so I'm going to be reading an article, kind of something I've written a few months ago after I was inspired by my adventure to the North Shore of Minnesota. And so I'm going to go through this article because I think it lays out quite a few points. It's going to be a little different than what I normally do. Normally I'm, expounding and kind of extrapolating and in different ways, right? Sometimes I have notes, sometimes I don't. Lately I've been doing no notes and just kind of going on kind of what I've thought about and kind of trying to string together. And so this time it's very structured. I'm going to be reading an article and going through. I might ad lib here and there, but I hope that this is helpful for you and kind of painting this picture of how, one, I'm meaning for this to be read, but also how we can have this conversation apart from just an article. And so apart from just a few words on a screen or a page, that we know that this affects us day in and day out. I know that my own struggle with anxiety, not struggle, but my own journey, I should say, with anxiety, that's sometimes a struggle, has really grown as I've adapted my mindset to understanding this need for adventure that we all have. And I just want to emphasize, I've been reading a bit of Freud and brought him along with me, and it's been so vital to my understanding of anxiety that I just wanted to read for you his thoughts, and he specifically his thoughts on how the heroic nature of man comes to be. And if you follow me on Twitter, I've kind of been posting about this essay of his, Thoughts on War and Death. It's so profound and so crucial, I think, to our time, because it not only talks about like the disillusionment that we have with war, but also how death, the modern mind conceives of death. And I think that death is in a way an adventure, that it is in a way, I'm come from a Christian background, and so death is this kind of journey to another life, to a new heaven, right, or a new earth, and so paradise, really. And so I think it's important to understand this as an adventure, and part of our adventure here, and that if you're not of that belief, that's okay, that we can still have the same conversation, just with different terms. And so, but I think it's so important because when we think of heroic efforts, right, those grand main characters of adventure, right, the Achilles of the world, the Odysseus's, the Theseuses, right, all of these great Greeks. I've been reading the Iliad, and so my mind's on Greeks, but I think it's so important that we understand that these men were going out and adventuring. They were testing themselves, and not only were they testing themselves, that death was not on their mind. And Freud says here that, but more, in my view, is that the instinctive and impulsive heroism, which knows no such motivation and flouts danger, in the spirits of Ansatzgruber, Hans, the road mender. I think I said that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Nothing can happen to me. Very simple. This idea that nothing can happen to me. And when we have that anxiety, everything can happen to me. It's so overbearing on us that everything can happen. We have no clue what can even happen. And that death, as Freud kind of points out in a couple earlier pages, that our modern conception of death is such that we have, and this is kind of what I've been able to kind of understand, is that we have nothing to live for. And so the only thing that we have is life itself. And that life itself is not meant to be the focus, that we're not supposed to narrow in on existing, that we're supposed to do something with that. And in the last episode, I talked about how what we're supposed to do with that is create. Like, that is the good, according to Nietzsche, right? And I'm gonna try to not talk about Nietzsche in this episode, but if it comes up, I'm sorry. I've already made one, but I think it's so important that when we think of adventure, like creation, like expanding our current life, our current existence, that's the purpose of it. Not just existing, not just being here, because when we try to affirm life itself, it's this like devouring spirit, I guess, right? This devouring energy that life itself has to be upkept. And you see this in people who are mad about trying to extend their lives. And so in the hope of not digressing too far into just some weird stuff and weird ways that people prevent their death, what I'm wanting to hone in on is how adventure, this process of going out of our comfort, of going beyond what we think is almost possible, that is where we begin to exist, that is where we begin to really see how life itself is not the point. I'm just reaching for this book again because he has a wonderful reference to the Hanseatic League, which they say, "It is necessary to sail the seas, it is not necessary to live." And this is exactly what I'm trying to get at with this article and with this motivation of bringing this content to you. So without further ado, I'm gonna get into this, and as things come up related to this, I am hoping to kind of pull it out, and I'm gonna have a conversation, just a brief conversation about this at the end. The article is also on my Substack. You can find it there if you want to follow along, if you want to read. You can just go to my Substack. But this is "Your Anxiety Needs an Adventure." A driving theme of human history is the call to adventure. Many of our monumental works of literature, and even monuments themselves, attempt to capture this very spirit on either marble or parchment. From the Odyssey to Don Quixote and the Lord of the Rings, we are commanded to scribble down and illustrate the campaigns of great heroes, whether they are victorious or meet a fatal end. Even our bodies respond to stories in a positive manner. Research has found storytelling leads to increases in oxytocin and positive emotion while decreasing cortisol, our stress hormone, and also pain responses. No wonder these great tales of adventure have persisted through the ages, and we still read centuries-old tales today. They make us feel good, and that's why we read them. The actual adventure process does just that for us and more. Take the benefits of storytelling and multiply them by 10. Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin production goes into overdrive when we begin a new quest. There's vital brain activation, neural growth, and cognitive resilience. They all flourish when we begin a new journey. Physical exercise, commonly required on an adventure, is associated with gains in more ways than we could begin to appreciate. Most importantly, and the thing I believe will resonate with the most, kind of living in the modern world, is the anti-anxiety effects taking an adventure has on a person. Now, some folks might even get anxious just thinking about going somewhere new. Others might never embark on a major journey because their fear is so great, so paralyzing. That right there is where the cure lies. When we encounter anxiety, it is because we are not able to determine the task and ask the question and answer it, is if our resources are adequate enough to meet the demands being imposed on us. There's simply too much ambiguity, so our brain tells our body to raise the alarm and let the cortisol and catecholamines flow to help us with the energy needed so we might defeat or escape some danger. The issue with anxiety from an idea, not from actual danger or general life stressful circumstances, is that often we are unable to change much at all and therefore can only freeze and exist in this state of recurrence. With a thought, or rather a string of thoughts, it is plausible that we are unaware the thought is misaligned and causing the anxiety we are experiencing. This leads us to experience anxiety with unknown origin, thus leading to a variety of cognitive biases and errors, because our brain tries to make sense of all of this. The error of false causality is common with anxiety, and perhaps the most common. This article is giving me anxiety. Them talking is giving me anxiety. The idea of that just, gives me anxiety. How often have you heard that? Our example object, the article you're currently reading and, now listening to, is not really causing the anxiety. But the number of thoughts, new and old, can be overwhelming and lead to this ambiguity that we've been talking about. This may seem like a simple cutting out of the middleman, but when understanding a problem, assigning causality incorrectly can lead to incorrect solutions. Limiting our options, getting ourselves unstuck, and moving towards a single goal is one of the best methods of reducing anxiety. If you were to sit in a therapist chair, and I sit in the chair of a therapist, if they're any good, would offer you some advice along those lines. I give that exact advice to my clients frequently, which usually takes place in the form of a new routine, alongside increasing their levels of self-discipline and adherence to that routine. to focus in on a single goal, to eliminate that ambiguity. Because when we limit the ambiguity you experience daily and command your life a bit more, magically, your anxiety starts to subside. So, how does adventure help the anxious person just as much, if not more? When we go on adventure, we are introducing ambiguous stimuli. That much is clear. We traipse about the forest floor or up on a mountain where we're miles from civilization and also likely disconnected from other people, from cellular device and all that stuff. Behind every tree could be a danger, something to eat us, a branch to crush us, or a pit to stumble and fall in. Yet we can encounter it still, and often we do so with excitement. Not only is there danger, but beauty and soul-filling wonder that accompanies those adventures. This is what we look to encounter despite the potential threat to our lives. We voluntarily confront adversity with every step. Adventures are not transactional. They are transformational. They take our schemas and expand them, often permanently, and that gives us a new lens to view the world with from that point on. Now, some trips are more transformative than others, and not all journeys taken will have a profound impact. Hiking around your town or in a familiar place is different than waltzing through the great cathedrals throughout Europe for the first time. It is the case that taking regular adventures, whether it is in and around your neighborhood or town or even by your office, little adventures can increase and expand your resilience and help you reduce your anxiety because you are continuing to assert your autonomy and defend yourself against this eternal reoccurrence. The same thing, day in, day out. And that's often a fear I have. Just a side note, a fear I have of myself is that I'm going to become a cog in a wheel and that everything is going to be the same and that's a bad thing. Now, on a recent trip to the North Shore of the Great Lakes Superior, and the greatest of the Great Lakes, I was able to enjoy an adventure for the first time in a while. Throughout the 4-day journey, my wife and I escaped from the cycle of daily life and enjoyed many, but certainly not all, of the attractions northern Minnesota has to offer. And it wasn't our drive there or the plans that we had made that turned the trip from enjoyable to spectacular, but rather the way that we had approached each point along the way. When attempting to bring the spirit of adventure forward, it's important to remember that spontaneity paired with novelty is what produces adventure. That pairing is what creates for us that thing that we need the most, that we need spontaneity and novelty, not merely a schedule of events. Have you ever been on a trip with a very rigid itinerary and little room for error? I know I have, and it's been absolutely miserable. And partly because I'm not a planner and that I like to just kind of go with it. But also, even for those who are so held to a plan that their anxiety can't allow that spontaneity, they have to have it ordered. And routine at work is important, just as it is at home. Discipline involves us carrying out that routine and working towards identified goals despite the actual desire not being present at all moments. Those two modes of execution are critical to the strategy of life, especially if we hope to live a fulfilling life. Like I talked about the cog in the machine, that it's good to have a schedule of events that is well ordered and particular to the person and creates that meaning and order throughout a society. However, a successful strategy of life does not end with routine and discipline, but also, among other things, must have adventure. Adventure is vital to our lives because it involves both the production of and response to spontaneity. When we have hearts of adventure, we are ready to pounce on an opportunity and open to respond to trouble, all leading us to become more resilient and adaptive across all situations. The greatest feeling associated with adventure is the lightness that comes with the freedom of no longer being subject to the expectations of routine and discipline. While we hiked around the forest and along waterfalls and on the banks of Superior itself, we were sure to follow what other path or little way that looked inspiring and leapt across rocks to experience a new vantage point. And escaping from the paths and trails allowed me to see that the defined trail, the established one, was not the only way forward, but it was only an option, and that there are many other options available to me. Taking this adventure reminded me of the micro adventures I went out on last summer. At the time, my summer courses were in full swing, and it happened to be the heaviest course load of the entire program. It was the second year, beginning of the second year, and it was packed full of exams and projects and papers and so many things to be done. And I became exhausted very quickly and tried to determine how I could avoid burnout since it was only the beginning of June. My solution was simple but yielded a bountiful harvest. I went for a walk every day in a different direction and left the paths when I was able. Living near good walking paths certainly helped, but I soon found other dirt trails on public land, and we became good friends, you could say. Even as more familiar paths near my home, especially on the way back, even with those, I walked on the grass rather than on the concrete sidewalk and along the lanes. When the semester concluded, I was still full of energy rather than barely keeping my head above water. The small adventures were a time to refill my cup, spend time in thought, pray, and appreciate the works of God. Believe it or not, it's difficult to find spiritual or even meaningful connection when we are surrounded constantly by gypsum walls, artificial light, and recirculated air. Not to mention awful paint, because I live in an apartment, awful paint. So take an adventure, big or small, shed anxiety by asserting your command over your environment and knowing that you have the capacity to overcome obstacles. Expand what you believe by expanding what you see. Start to live your life by taking actual steps towards experiencing more of our world and what it has to offer. So that's my article. Let me know what you thought about it, what I could have improved in my writing and whatnot. But what I'm hoping to do now is just to kind of discuss a little bit about kind of what we've already been talking about, but the need for adventure in humanity is so prevalent. And I think that what we can do, because in our 21st century, very modern lifestyle, we have adventure right in front of us. And I've been looking at an adventure right here, this podcast, this search for truth, all viable through my phone, able to be done. And it's such an incredible opportunity. But also with adventure, there is sometimes too much, that there's limits that we should be setting on at our adventures. And if you haven't picked up already, what I'm getting at is scrolling, of looking through our smartphones and doom scrolling, something I'm guilty of, no doubt, very, very guilty of indeed. And so I think it's important for us to know that this novelty, because that's what phones provide, that's what Instagram is there for, is to provide novelty. That's how you found this video. It was novel to you. You didn't know it, and so you took a chance. And you said, I'm going to watch this guy with a crazy mustache. Side note, I actually got called Theodore Roosevelt, or that I looked like Theodore Roosevelt. It's one of the greatest compliments I think I've ever gotten in my life. It was actually really cool. And so let me know what you think of the stash too, if I should keep it or not. But our algorithms are set up to give us novelty, to give us something that we're gonna watch. And we watch it because it's new, because it might have potential. There is value, and this is something that I didn't cover here, there's value in something new. However, something new isn't always good for us. That something new all the time leads to chaos. That radical changes, that radical transformations all the time are not good. That self-actualization, this reaching the pinnacle of self-awareness, is not always good, because then we become disconnected with who we are, and that's not helpful. And so what we want to do is we're wanting to make a life and orientate ourselves towards a model that gives us the adventure needed, but also establishes routine, keeps us within the wheels of society, and creating habit and order, because that's what's good for us. Now, tyrannical order is not good, but also so is fluid chaos. That's not good either. And so we've got to find this mix. And the wonderful thing is that each one of us, you, me, your grandma, are all different. And we all need varying levels of adventure, but we all need adventure. And I think that's what it's important to kind of hone in on here, is that we need adventure. And so whether you're starting to just begin your journey, or you're experienced and you're listening to me kind of ramble on here just a little bit, although I don't think I'm rambling, but I think it's important to know what is out there and what has been done in the past, because walking through a forest is great, walking up mountains, hiking, it's great. It's a good example of an adventure, but there's also examples of adventure elsewhere. There's this right here, literary adventure. Adventure in the idea, like I said at the beginning, adventure in the realm of ideas. It's all there. And actually, it's funny that I have this book, because I think that the great books, and that's why I have them basically as my reading list, the great books provide for us the adventure necessary to understand where we've been and where we need to go. Because if we've already been there, it's useless to go adventure again just for the sake of making sure that we've done it. It's important to know that we've got another place to be. And we're not going to know that unless what we're doing is learning about our past, learning about our history, learning those trails, to relate it to hiking, learning those trails that we've already been on. And that, yeah, it's good to travel those paths because they're established, and often they become highways. That's how these roads were established. Driving roads were established because we traveled on them all the time. They were connecting these great distances in the most efficient way most of the time. And that what we can do is use those, but if we only ever stick to the highway, we never experience the beauty that exists outside of that. And we also might never find the treasure. We might never find the treasure of life that exists in the adventure. It's necessary for us to adventure, just as it is necessary for us to create. And so I hope that, because I could go on, I hope that what I've been able to do for you is just establish this idea of, yeah, this is something that needs to happen, that my anxiety needs an adventure. So let me know what you thought. Like the video, subscribe, share with your friends, whatever. Whatever you do, it's great, and I appreciate it. But make sure, above all that crap, make sure that you take an adventure today so that you might have somewhere new to keep exploring, to keep growing, and keep being human. So thank you all for sticking along, for listening, and I'm going to see you next time.